Steve Harvey was in the middle of hosting what seemed like a typical Family Feud episode when something happened that would make him stop the game completely and leave everyone in tears of joy. It was a regular afternoon taping, and the studio in Atlanta was buzzing with the usual energy that comes with two families competing for the grand prize. The Rodriguez family from San Diego was facing off against the Bennett family from Oregon, and everything seemed perfectly routine until one moment changed the entire show into something nobody in that studio would ever forget. The Rodriguez family was doing well in the game. They consisted of Maria Rodriguez, a 29-year-old elementary school teacher, her mother Carmen, her two sisters Isabella and Sophia, and her best friend Jessica, who was practically family. Maria stood at the end of the family line, smiling and cheering for her team, but anyone watching closely might have noticed she checked her phone between every round, her smile occasionally faltering when she looked at the screen. Steve Harvey noticed it during the second commercial break. He'd been hosting this show long enough to recognize when someone's mind was elsewhere, when they were present but not fully there. "You doing all right, sweetheart?" Steve asked Maria quietly, as the crew reset for the next round. Maria looked up from her phone and forced a brighter smile. "I'm great, Mr. Harvey. Just excited to be here." Steve wasn't buying it. He'd interviewed thousands of contestants over the years, and he knew when someone was carrying something heavy. "You sure? You keep checking that phone like you're waiting for something important." Maria's smile wavered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. It's just, my husband is deployed overseas. We usually video chat every day, but he's been really busy lately, and I haven't heard from him in 3 days. I keep hoping he'll message." Steve's expression softened immediately. "How long has he been gone?" 8 months this time," Maria said, her voice catching slightly. "He's got 4 more months before he's supposed to come home. We've been married for 6 years, and this is his 3rd deployment. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but you never get used to missing someone you love." Steve finished gently. Maria nodded, dabbing at her eyes carefully so she wouldn't smudge her makeup. "My students made him thank you cards for his service. 28 third graders, all drawing pictures and writing notes. I mailed them last week, but I don't know if he's gotten them yet. The mail is so slow sometimes." Steve put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your husband's serving our country, and you're holding down the fort at home. That takes a special kind of strength, Maria. Both of you are making sacrifices." "Thank you," Maria whispered. "Some days are harder than others. Today's actually our anniversary. 6 years married today, and he's been gone for about half of them total when you add up all the deployments." Steve squeezed her shoulder supportively before the stage manager called them back to their positions. But as he walked back to his spot, he caught the eye of his executive producer, Marcus Freeman, who gave him a subtle nod. Steve felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. He'd been briefed on something before the taping started, and now the pieces were clicking into place. The game continued, and Maria threw herself into it, trying to stay focused. When Steve asked her a question about the most romantic anniversary gift, she answered, handwritten letters, without hesitation. "That's specific," Steve noted, with interest. Maria smiled. This time, genuinely. "Daniel writes me letters. Real letters, with pen and paper. He mails them from wherever he is. I have a whole box of them at home. On hard days, I read them, and it's like he's there with me." The audience made appreciative sounds, and Steve could see several people dabbing at their eyes. "That's beautiful. That's real love, right there." The Rodriguez family was on a roll, making it through several rounds with impressive answers. Carmen, Maria's mother, was a firecracker who kept making Steve laugh with her commentary. Isabella and Sophia, Maria's sisters, who were 26 and 24, were supportive and energetic, celebrating every point. Jessica, the best friend, had known Maria since they were 7 years old and loved her like a sister. "So how'd you and Daniel meet?" Steve asked during another break, genuinely curious, but also knowing he needed to keep the conversation going in this direction. "College," Maria said, her face lighting up in a way it hadn't all day. "I was studying to be a teacher. He was in ROTC. We met at a campus coffee shop. I spilled my entire latte on his textbook, and instead of getting mad, he just laughed. and asked if he could buy me another one so I'd have something to spill on his notebook too. Steve chuckled. Sounds like he was smooth. He was, Maria agreed. We got married right after graduation. He went into the service. I started teaching. We always said we'd figure it out together, and we have. It's not easy, but he's worth it. They're always worth it. The good ones. As they set up for the next round, Steve noticed Maria checking her phone again. The longing on her face was palpable, the kind of missing someone that settles deep in your bones. He thought about what she'd said about their anniversary, about the box of handwritten letters she kept for the hard days. The Rodriguez family made it to Fast Money. Maria was chosen to go first, and as she stood at the podium, Steve could see her taking deep breaths, trying to center herself. All right, Maria, Steve said warmly. You ready to do this? Ready as I'll ever be, Maria replied, gripping the podium. Remember, 20 seconds, 5 questions. Here we go. Steve glanced at his cards. Name something you do every day when you miss someone. Check your phone, Maria answered immediately. Good answer, Steve acknowledged, and the audience applauded. Name the hardest part of being apart from someone you love. Not being able to hug them, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. Name something a military spouse does to stay strong. Maria paused, then said firmly, focuses on the reunion. Counts down the days. That's good, Steve encouraged. Name the best moment of a deployment ending. The first hug, Maria whispered, her voice cracking. The audience was completely silent, feeling the weight of her answers. Steve continued gently. Name something that makes distance easier. Love, Maria said simply. Love makes it possible. The buzzer sounded. Steve walked over and handed her a tissue. You did real good, Maria. Real good. As they were setting up for Carmen to take her turn at Fast Money, something unprecedented happened. Steve's producer, Marcus Freeman, walked onto the stage in the middle of active filming. In all the years Steve had been hosting Family Feud, Marcus had never interrupted a taping like this. He was carrying a phone, and his expression was serious, but with something else underneath it, something that looked almost like barely contained excitement. Steve, Marcus said, his voice picked up by the microphones. I need you to take a phone call, right now. Steve looked confused, playing his part. Marcus, we're in the middle of taping. Can this wait? No, sir. It absolutely cannot wait, Marcus said firmly. Trust me on this. The audience began murmuring. Maria's family looked confused. The Bennett family, their competitors, seemed just as bewildered. Steve took the phone, and the studio fell silent. Hello? Steve said into the phone. Mr. Harvey? The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. This is Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson calling. I understand you have Maria Rodriguez on your show today? Steve's eyebrows rose. He looked immediately at Maria, whose hand had flown to her mouth. Yes, sir. She's right here. Mr. Harvey, I'm calling about Captain Daniel Rodriguez, United States Army. I wanted to reach out to his wife on a very special day. Maria had gone completely still. Her mother, Carmen, had moved closer to her, putting an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Her sisters were holding hands, eyes wide. What about Captain Rodriguez, sir? Steve asked, his voice careful but warm. Well, Mr. Harvey, today is Captain and Mrs. Rodriguez's 6th wedding anniversary. Captain Rodriguez wanted to make sure his wife knew he was thinking about her, even though he's far from home. Maria's eyes filled with tears. He remembered, she whispered to her mother. He's so busy, but he remembered. Could you put Mrs. Rodriguez on the phone, Mr. Harvey? The colonel asked. I believe Captain Rodriguez would like to speak to his wife. Steve walked over to Maria and handed her the phone. His eyes were already glistening because he knew what was coming, but he kept his expression neutral. Maria, honey, Captain Rodriguez wants to talk to you. Maria took the phone with shaking hands. Daniel, baby, is that you? The voice that came through was warm and familiar, and Steve had positioned himself close enough that his microphone picked it up. Hey, beautiful. Happy anniversary. Maria let out a sob. I can't believe you called. I know how busy you are. I've been trying not to bother you, but I've missed you so much. I know, baby. I know. I miss you every single day, Daniel said. Maria, I need to tell you something. What is it? Are you okay? The worry in her voice was immediate. I'm better than okay. Maria, I need you to turn around. Maria froze. What? Turn around, baby. Maria turned slowly, and there, walking onto the Family Feud stage in his army dress uniform, medals gleaming under the studio lights, was Captain Daniel Rodriguez. He was tall and handsome, with kind eyes that were locked entirely on his wife. A huge smile on his face, despite the tears already streaming down his cheeks. The studio absolutely erupted. Maria's hands were covering her face, her whole body shaking. For a moment she seemed frozen in disbelief, and then she was running. She ran across that stage and threw herself into her husband's arms with such force that he had to take a step back to catch her. His arms wrapped around her completely, lifting her off her feet as she sobbed into his shoulder. "You're here," Maria kept saying over and over. "You're here. You're here. You're real. You're here." "I'm here, baby. I'm home," Daniel said into her hair, his voice breaking. "I'm home early. Surprise." Maria pulled back just enough to look at his face, touching it like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "Early? But you said 4 more months. You said—" "I know what I said," Daniel laughed through his tears. "But my assignment ended ahead of schedule, and they granted early leave. I've been back stateside for a week, staying with your mom while we coordinated this surprise with the show." Maria whipped around to look at her mother, who was crying and nodding and laughing all at once. "Mom, you knew?" "We all knew, Mija," Carmen said, gesturing to include Isabella, Sophia, and Jessica. "We've been planning this for 2 weeks. It's been so hard not to tell you." "Best surprise ever," Sophia shouted, pumping her fist in the air, which made everyone laugh through their tears. Steve was openly weeping, not even trying to hide it. He pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his eyes. The Bennett family, the competing family, were crying too. The camera operators were crying. The entire studio was crying happy tears. Maria turned back to Daniel, and he cupped her face in his hands gently. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Rodriguez." "Happy anniversary," Maria whispered. And then they were kissing. And the audience cheered and applauded so loudly that the sound engineer had to adjust his levels. When they finally separated, Steve approached them with his microphone. "Captain Rodriguez, welcome home, sir." Daniel turned and extended his hand to Steve, who shook it warmly, before pulling the younger man into a hug. "Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for giving me the chance to surprise my wife like this." "How long have you been back?" Steve asked. "Landed at Joint Base Lewis McChord 7 days ago," Daniel explained, one arm still firmly around Maria's waist, like he was afraid to let her go. "I had to do some processing, some debriefing, the usual return protocol. The whole time I was calling your producers, trying to coordinate timing. When we found out Maria had been selected to be on the show, it seemed like perfect timing." "And you managed to keep this secret for a whole week?" Steve asked Carmen, impressed. Carmen laughed. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every time Maria would call me crying because she missed Daniel, I wanted to tell her so badly. But we wanted this moment to be perfect." Maria looked up at her husband. "I don't understand. You've been back for a week and you were staying at my mom's house? How did I not know?" "You work until 6 every day, then you go straight home," Daniel explained. "Your mom would text me when you were on your way, and I'd hide in the guest room until you left. It was like being a teenager, sneaking around again." "We had some close calls," Isabella added. "Remember when you stopped by Tuesday night unexpectedly?" Maria gasped. "Daniel was there, in the garage," Daniel confirmed. "I heard your voice and I almost gave up the whole plan just to run out and see you." Steve shook his head in amazement. "This is incredible. The whole family kept this secret for a week?" Daniel's face broke into an enormous grin. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done." Every time Maria's voice was on speakerphone when she'd call her mom, I wanted to grab the phone and tell her I was home. The studio was completely captivated by the reunion. Maria and Daniel stood there holding each other, and Steve gave them space to just be together for a moment. The camera operators were crying. The entire studio was crying happy tears. He walked over to the Rodriguez family, who were all swarming around Daniel, everyone trying to hug him at once. Jessica was crying so hard she couldn't speak. Isabella and Sophia were taking turns hugging their brother-in-law, while Maria stayed close to his side, holding his hand like she was afraid he might disappear. "Daniel," Steve said, "tell us what it feels like to be home." Daniel took a moment to compose himself, his arm wrapped tightly around Maria. "Mr. Harvey, I've been deployed 3 times in 6 years of marriage. I've missed anniversaries, birthdays, countless ordinary Tuesdays that I would have given anything to be home for." He looked at his wife, his voice thick with emotion. "Maria has been everything. She's been strong when I know she wanted to fall apart. She sent care packages, written me letters, kept our home running, kept teaching those kids at school, even when her heart was breaking. She's my hero." Maria was shaking her head. "You're the one who serves." "No," Daniel said firmly but gently. "We both serve. I serve in uniform, but you serve every single day at home. Military spouses don't get enough credit for what they sacrifice. You've gone to bed alone, made decisions alone, celebrated holidays alone. Baby, you're the strongest person I know." Steve nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. The families at home, they serve too. They sacrifice too." The audience applauded, the tension breaking beautifully. Daniel kissed Maria's forehead gently. Steve addressed the audience again. "You know what, folks? We're doing something different today. The game doesn't matter anymore. Both families are winning the maximum prize today." The audience erupted in applause. The Bennett family looked stunned, and their grandmother called out, "That's right. That's how it should be." Steve continued, "But we're going to do more than that. Daniel, Maria, how long is your leave?" Daniel looked uncertain. "I have 30 days of leave, and then I report to Joint Base Lewis McChord for my next assignment. It's stateside, though, Washington State. We'll be moving there as a family." "So you're home for good? No more deployments?" Steve asked. "That's the plan," Daniel confirmed. "I've completed my deployment rotation. My next assignment is training and education. I'll be teaching at the base, which means regular hours and coming home every night." Maria started crying again, and Daniel pulled her closer. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone. I wanted to tell you in person. Baby, I'm done with deployments. I get to be a full-time husband now." "In all my years doing this show," Steve said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I've learned that it's not about the game. It's about moments like this. It's about families being whole. Maria, you said earlier that love makes distance possible, but love also makes coming home the sweetest thing in the world." He turned to the Bennett family. "Come on over here. This isn't a competition anymore. This is a celebration." The Bennett family crossed the stage, and their grandmother, a woman in her 60s named Dorothy, went straight to Maria and hugged her. "My son served for 20 years, she said softly. "I know what you've been through. I know those long nights, and the worry, and the strength it takes. You're not alone, sweetheart." Maria hugged her back tightly. Thank you so much." The two families stood together on that stage, not as competitors, but as one group celebrating something beautiful. Steve abandoned the game format entirely, and what followed was something special. "You know what?" Steve announced. "My foundation wants to do something. Daniel, Maria, you're moving to Washington State. That's expensive. We're going to help with your moving costs and get you set up in your new home. Consider it a welcome home gift." Maria and Daniel tried to protest, but Steve held up his hand. "No arguments. This is what we do. This is how we take care of our military families." The taping continued, but it wasn't really about Family Feud anymore. It became a conversation about military life, about service and sacrifice, about the strength of families separated by duty. Steve had Daniel share stories about what it was like to be away, the things he missed, the way he stayed connected to his family through letters and video calls, and counting down the days until he could come home. Maria talked about the reality of being a military spouse, the loneliness, the worry, the nights when she cried herself to sleep missing him. But she also talked about the pride she felt, the community of other military spouses who supported each other, and the love that made it all worthwhile. "People ask me if it's worth it," Maria said, looking at her husband. "And the answer is always yes." "Is it hard?" "Absolutely." "Are there days when I'm exhausted and lonely and just want him home?" "Of course. But at the end of the day, I married this man for better or worse, and I meant those vows. The deployments are part of our story, but they're not our whole story. Our story is about love that endures distance, about commitment that survives separation, about a family that stays strong no matter what." Daniel squeezed her hand. "And now we get to write the next chapter, the one where I'm home for dinner every night, where I get to take out the trash and mow the lawn and all those normal, ordinary things that I used to take for granted." The Bennett family shared that they had a nephew currently serving overseas, and Dorothy talked about the care packages she sent, the letters she wrote, the way she prayed for all the service members and their families every single night. "That's what I want people to know," Steve said to the cameras. "Behind every service member is a family that serves too. Maria, Carmen, Isabella, Sophia, Jessica, you all served in your own way. You supported Maria, you kept the home fires burning. And Dorothy, you're still supporting military families through your nephew. That matters. That all matters." As the taping wound down, Steve made another announcement. "We're going to stay in touch with this family. When you get settled in Washington, when you're in your new home, with Daniel coming home from work every day, we want to hear about it. We want to follow your story. And in the meantime," he continued, turning to the audience, "I want everyone watching this to think about the military families in your communities. Check in on them. Invite them to dinner. Send care packages. These small acts of kindness mean everything." Daniel stood at attention and addressed the crowd. "I want to thank everyone here, the production team who worked so hard to coordinate this surprise. Steve Harvey for giving me this platform to come home to my family in such a special way. The Bennett family for being so gracious and understanding when we completely abandoned the game." He paused, his voice getting thick again. "But most of all, I want to thank my wife. Maria, you are the love of my life. You've held our family together through 3 deployments. You've been the constant, the anchor, the strength when I was far away. I love you more than words can say. Happy anniversary, baby. Happy anniversary," Maria whispered back. "Welcome home." They kissed again, and the audience erupted in cheers and applause. Steve wrapped up by having everyone take a massive group photo, both families, the crew, everyone together. It would become one of the most shared images from Family Feud's history, a snapshot of joy and love and homecoming. As the families finally prepared to leave the stage, Carmen was already planning a welcome home dinner for that evening. Isabella and Sophia were taking endless photos. Jessica was still crying happy tears. Daniel pulled Steve aside one more time. "Mr. Harvey, I don't know how to thank you for this." "You already did," Steve replied, gripping his shoulder. "You served your country, you loved your family, even from far away, and you came home. That's thanks enough." "Maria has watched Family Feud every day since I left on my first deployment," Daniel said. "She said it was her happy place, something light and funny when everything felt heavy. And now this show gave me the chance to surprise her, to show her and our whole family how much I love them. That's a gift I can never repay." "Just be a good husband," Steve said simply. "Be present. Love her every day. That's all the payment needed." The 2 men hugged, and then Daniel rejoined his family. Maria was talking animatedly with her mother and sisters, making plans for the evening, for the move, for their new life in Washington. When Daniel appeared, she reached out and grabbed his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You okay?" he asked her softly. "I'm perfect," Maria said, and she meant it. For the first time in 8 months, everything is perfect. The show wrapped, but the story continued. The Rodriguez family went out for that pizza dinner, all of them together, celebrating. They drove back to Carmen's house, where Daniel's duffel bag was waiting in the guest room, and that night, for the first time in 8 months, Daniel and Maria fell asleep in each other's arms. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of the most watched Family Feud episodes in the show's history. The reunion clip went viral, shared millions of times across social media. Veterans organizations reached out. Other military families shared their own stories. The response was overwhelming and beautiful. Steve Harvey would later say in an interview, "That phone call, that moment when Daniel walked out and Maria saw him, that changed me. It reminded me why we do what we do. It's not about the laughs or the ratings. It's about these moments when we get to be part of something real and important. It's about love winning." 3 months later, the Rodriguez family sent Steve a Christmas card from their new home in Washington. In the photo, Daniel was in casual clothes, home from a regular day of teaching at the base. Maria was smiling, truly smiling, the kind of smile that comes from a full heart. They stood together in front of their new home, finally whole. Steve kept that card in his dressing room, right next to a photo from the taping the moment Daniel walked out onto that stage, the split second before Maria saw him, when everything was still surprise and anticipation and joy, about to explode into reality, because that's what that day had been. Pure, unexpected joy. A reminder that sometimes the best surprises aren't about winning money or prizes. Sometimes the best surprise is simply coming home to the person who loves you, who waited for you, who never stopped believing in the day when you'd walk through the door and make your whole again. Maria framed one of the photos from the taping and hung it in their new home in Washington. Sometimes when Daniel came home from work, he'd find her standing in front of it, just looking and smiling. The first time he asked her what she was thinking, she turned to him and said, "I'm thinking about how lucky we are. How many people get their perfect moment captured like that? How many people get to remember exactly what it felt like when everything changed from sad to happy in an instant?" Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, as they both looked at the photo. "Best anniversary ever. Best surprise ever," Maria corrected. They stood together, and Maria thought about how far they'd come from video calls and countdown calendars to this, to ordinary Tuesday afternoons where they were together under the same roof. That evening, as they sat down to dinner together, something they'd done every single night since moving to Washington, they talked about their day, their students, their plans for the weekend. Simple, ordinary conversations that meant everything because they could have them face to face. Later, as they sat on their back porch watching the stars, Maria turned to her husband. "Do you ever miss it? The adventure? The importance of what you were doing overseas?" Daniel considered this carefully. "I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of what I did and who I served with. But Maria, there's no adventure greater than being here with you. There's no mission more important than being your husband. This is where I'm supposed to be." He pulled her closer. "I served my country, and I'm proud of that. But now, I get to serve my family. And honestly, this feels like the most important mission of all." Maria kissed him, long and sweet, and thought about that day at Family Feud when he walked out onto that stage. She thought about how her whole world had tilted from sadness to joy in a single moment. She thought about how she'd spent 8 months missing him, and now she got to have him here every day for all the ordinary and extraordinary moments of their life together. The phone call that interrupted Family Feud that day didn't just bring a soldier home. It reminded everyone watching that love is worth waiting for, that families separated by duty can be reunited by grace, and that sometimes the greatest gift isn't winning a game, it's getting to go home to the person who makes home worth coming back to. And somewhere in Atlanta, Steve Harvey kept that Christmas card and that photo. Reminders of the day when his show stopped being about questions and answers and became about something infinitely more important. The pure, perfect joy of 2 people made whole again.